August 15, 1943, Kiska Island, Alaska. 34,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches under heavy fog. Naval guns have pounded the island for weeks. The plan is textbook. The intelligence is solid. 5,000 Japanese soldiers are dug in, waiting. Within hours, men are dying. Dozens wounded. A destroyer will explode, taking 71 sailors to the bottom of the harbor. There's just one detail everyone missed. There isn't a single Japanese soldier on the island. There hasn't been for 18 days. This is the story of how Allied forces fought one of the strangest battles of World War II. How fog, assumptions, and a brilliant enemy withdrawal turned a routine invasion into a deadly farce. And how more than 300 Americans and Canadians became casualties in a battle against an enemy that wasn't there. To understand how this happened, we need to go back to June 1942. While the world watched Midway, the Japanese did something almost no one remembers today. They invaded North America, not the mainland, not even close to a city, but they did it. Japanese forces occupied two barren rocks in the Aleutian chain, Attu and Kiska, the westernmost points of Alaska. Islands so remote and miserable that even the Aleutian natives didn't live there year-round. But location matters more than comfort in war. These islands sat astride the northern Pacific shipping routes. They threatened America's lifeline to the Soviet Union, and psychologically, they were on American soil under Japanese control. The only successful Axis occupation of U.S. territory in the entire war. Washington couldn't leave them there. By 1943, the Allies had turned the tide in the Pacific. Island hopping was working, and the two Japanese outposts in Alaska had become an embarrassment that needed to be fixed. In May 1943, American forces launched Operation Land Crab to retake Attu. It went badly. The Japanese garrison of about 2,500 men had turned the island into a frozen fortress. American intelligence had underestimated their numbers by almost half. What planners thought would be a quick 3-day operation turned into nearly 3 weeks of brutal combat in some of the worst terrain and weather imaginable. The final tally: 549 Americans killed, 1,148 wounded. Almost the entire Japanese garrison died, many in a final suicidal banzai charge. Attu was supposed to be the easy one. Now the Allies had to deal with Kiska, and Kiska had more than twice as many Japanese defenders. The American and Canadian planners looked at the map. They'd just spent 3 weeks and suffered terrible casualties, taking an island with 2,500 defenders. Kiska had 5,183. This was going to be a bloodbath. But on July 28, 1943, while Allied forces prepared for D-Day at Kiska, something remarkable happened. The Japanese left, all of them. Under the cover of Aleutian fog so thick you couldn't see 10 feet, a Japanese naval task force of cruisers and destroyers slipped through the Allied blockade. In less than an hour, they loaded 5,183 men and evacuated the island. Operation KE, a masterpiece of naval timing and weather exploitation. The Japanese had learned from Attu. They knew what was coming. Rather than sacrifice another garrison in a pointless last stand, they pulled off one of the war's most successful evacuations. They waited for the weather, moved fast, and disappeared into the fog before Allied radar or patrol aircraft knew what was happening. Think about that timing. The Allies had dozens of ships patrolling the waters around Kiska. They had air reconnaissance, they had submarines, and they had even broken Japanese codes. But an entire garrison just disappeared. Here's where it gets interesting. The Allied reconnaissance pilots kept reporting activity on Kiska. Campfires, movement, radio signals. All of it was wrong. Some of it was wishful thinking. Some was confirmation bias, seeing what they expected to see. But the Japanese had been clever as well. They'd left booby traps on timers. They'd set fires to burn on delay. They'd even left their dogs behind. Those dogs would create some very confused intelligence reports in the coming weeks. By early August, Operation Cottage was assembled and ready to go. 34,000 American troops, mainly from the 7th Infantry Division. 5,000 Canadian soldiers from the 13th Infantry Brigade. The 1st Special Service Force, an elite U.S.-Canadian commando unit that would later become legendary. Dozens of warships, hundreds of aircraft, landing craft by the dozen. The entire operation had momentum. It had a timeline. It had political pressure behind it. And here's the critical failure. No one had definitively verified that the Japanese were still there. Reconnaissance was sketchy because of the fog. The reports were contradictory, but the assumption held they were still there. Where else would they go? On August 13th, the Allied naval bombardment began. For days, cruisers and destroyers pounded Kiska with thousands of shells. Aircraft dropped bombs. The island was turned into a moonscape of craters and destroyed buildings. All of it hits an empty island. Think about the crews on those ships, the pilots dropping those bombs. They were doing everything right, following the plan, softening up the enemy positions. They just didn't know they were shooting at ghosts. August 15th, Operation Cottage begins. The first wave of the 7th Infantry Division hits the beaches. The fog is so thick that the landing craft can barely see each other. Some beaches are in the wrong locations. Others have to circle in the murk, searching for their assigned sectors. The troops expect hell. They've been briefed on Attu. They know the Japanese fight to the death. Every man is ready for ambushes, machine gun nests, and artillery. They climb out of the boats, weapons ready. Nothing. Not a shot. Not a sound except the waves and the fog. The first patrols move inland, advancing cautiously. They find abandoned positions, wrecked equipment, empty bunkers. Still no enemy contact. But here's where the Aleutian fog becomes an active enemy. In war, the most dangerous moment is right after you think you're safe. American troops were moving through thick fog on an island they'd been told held 5,000 enemy soldiers. Every shadow could be an ambush. Every sound might be an infiltrator. Then someone starts shooting. Within minutes, you've got troops from different units firing at movement in the fog. No one can see more than a few yards. Radio communications are breaking down in the terrain. American bullets kill the first American casualty on Kiska. He won't be the last. August 16th, the Canadians land. The fog is even worse. Units lose contact with each other immediately. The 13th Brigade is spread across unfamiliar terrain, unable to see or coordinate. Then they start taking fire. The Canadians are shooting at Americans. The Americans are shooting at Canadians. Both sides think they're under attack by the Japanese. Men are dying from friendly fire in double-digit numbers. Booby traps wounded others the Japanese left behind. Explosives rigged to doors. Tripwires across paths. Mines buried in likely approach routes. And through it all, there's this growing, surreal awareness. We haven't seen a single Japanese soldier. August 18th, 1943. Kiska Harbor. The destroyer USS Abner Reed is on patrol, part of the naval screen protecting the invasion force. She's been in action throughout the Aleutian campaign. Good ship. Experienced crew. At approximately 1830, she strikes a floating mine. The explosion is catastrophic. The mine detonates against her stern, ripping off her entire aft section. 71 men are killed instantly or trapped below. 47 more are wounded. The ship survives, barely. She limps to port, missing a third of her length. Here's what makes the Abner Reed tragedy especially bitter. The Japanese didn't target her. They couldn't have. They'd been gone for 3 weeks. They'd laid defensive minefields before they evacuated, standard procedure, and either the Allied minesweeping was incomplete, or the mines had drifted, or someone made a navigation error. Doesn't matter. 71 men died fighting an enemy that wasn't there. By August 18th, the same day that Abner Reed went down, the reality was becoming impossible to deny. Patrols had swept the entire island. Every position was empty. Every bunker abandoned. The only living things they'd found were dogs, the ones the Japanese had left behind, now half wild and terrified. Those ghostly noises in the fog, dogs barking in empty camps. The Japanese had been gone for 3 weeks. The Allies had bombarded an empty island, invaded it with 34,000 troops, and were now fighting themselves in the fog. One soldier later described it.
We found about 100 dogs, confused, hungry, desperate for human contact. They'd been surviving on garbage and fish. Every time we heard something at night, we'd panic. It was just the dogs.
Imagine being the commander who has to write that report. We took casualties from abandoned pets. By August 24th, Kiska was officially secured. Final casualty count, approximately 92 killed, 221 wounded. Some sources go higher. The exact numbers depend on how you count the Abner Reed losses and whether you include non-combat injuries like trench foot and exposure. 32 of those dead were from ground combat. Combat against each other. The strategic result? The Aleutian campaign was over. The Japanese never came back. Alaska was secure. But the cost was absurd. 0 Japanese soldiers were on Kiska. 0 Allied soldiers needed to die there. But nearly 100 did, and more than 200 were wounded. So what went wrong? How does a modern, well-equipped military invade an empty island and take casualties? First, confirmation bias. Allied intelligence assumed the Japanese were there. Every piece of contradictory evidence was explained away. Campfires? The Japanese are trying to seem stronger than they are. No radio traffic? They're maintaining radio silence. Limited visual confirmation? The fog. No one seriously questioned the base assumption because questioning it seemed crazy. Where would they go? Second, environmental overmatch. The Aleutian fog isn't like morning mist. It's a thick, cold, persistent blanket that can last for days. It nullifies air reconnaissance. It makes naval patrols nearly blind, and it turns ground combat into a nightmare of confusion. The planners knew about the fog. They didn't respect it enough as an active threat multiplier. Third, operational momentum. By August 1943, the invasion force was assembled, briefed, and ready. You had 34,000 troops, dozens of ships, aircraft, logistics, all pointed at one target. Canceling or delaying would have required definitive proof that the island was empty, and getting that proof required better reconnaissance than the fog allowed. So the operation proceeded on assumption rather than verification. Fourth, coordination failures. You had American and Canadian troops operating together for the first time in these conditions. Different radio protocols, different hand signals, different combat doctrines. Add fog so thick you can't see your own troops clearly, and you've got a recipe for disaster. Here's the kicker. After Kiska, the Allies completely changed how they did amphibious intelligence. They developed better verification protocols. They learned to weigh environmental factors more heavily in planning. They improved inter-service communication standards. All lessons that could have been learned with zero casualties if someone had insisted on visual confirmation before landing 34,000 troops. Operation Cottage ended with the slow, embarrassing realization that the enemy had left weeks ago and they'd been shooting at each other the whole time. That's not just a military blunder. That's a lesson written in blood about the cost of assumptions. 92 men died on Kiska. Every single death was preventable. Their families received telegrams saying they died in battle. That was true. But the enemy they died fighting was fog, fear, and assumptions no one verified. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more myths debunked and dive into history's biggest military failures, hit that subscribe button.